Mariah never asked for everything. Fame, fortune, the jet-set life that came with loving someone like Giannis. None of it had been on her wish list. What she wanted always was honesty. Presence. The little moments that stitched a life together. And in Giannis, she'd found that, at least that's what she believed. Over the years, she had grown used to his silence, the occasional drift in his eyes after the games, the quiet way he sometimes excused himself from joy. She chalked it up to the weight he carried, the pressure of representing a country, a culture and a family all at once. But now, as she sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor of their Milwaukee home, flipping through an old box of photographs from their early years, a question surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. Had she ever really known him completely? The sun spilled across the floor, warming the edges of yellowing photos. Mariah smiled softly at a snapshot from their first real vacation together, Giannis holding her hand on a narrow path in Santorini, both of them sunburned and laughing. Another photo, Giannis asleep on the couch, their newborn resting on his chest. These were the memories she clung to, the evidence of a man who loved her, who showed up, even when the world demanded all of him. But then she saw it. At the bottom of the box, beneath stacks of birthday cards and press passes, was an envelope. Old, worn, its edges curled like dry leaves. Her name was on the front, Mariah, scrawled in Giannis's unmistakable handwriting. No date, no return address, just her name. She held it in her hands, heart accelerating. It wasn't sealed. It hadn't been hidden, not exactly, just buried, forgotten, or maybe meant to be found much later. She didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, she placed it carefully on the kitchen counter and went about the rest of her afternoon. There were school pickups, errands, a Zoom call she barely remembered afterwards, but the envelope stayed with her, burning, whispering. That night, as Giannis tucked their son into bed and kissed her forehead, she noticed how tired he looked, not just physically. His exhaustion was deeper, older. Later she found him on the porch wrapped in a hoodie, staring out into the cold night air. She brought him a cup of tea, the envelope in her hand. "I found something today," she said quietly. He didn't look at her, just sipped the tea. She set the envelope on the table between them. He stared at it, a long time. Then he said, "I thought I'd lost that." "Did you mean to give it to me?" "Yes," he said, "a long time ago." "Why didn't you?" He didn't answer immediately. His eyes were far away again, that place inside him where she could never follow. "It was never the right moment," he said at last. They sat in silence. The steam from the tea curled into the air between them, vanishing into the dark. "I won't read it," she said, "not unless you want me to." He turned to her then. His eyes, always warm, were glassy now. "There's something I should have told you a long time ago," he said, "but I didn't know how. I was afraid of how you'd see me, of what it would change." Mariah leaned in, placing her hand over his. "Giannis, whatever it is, we've already lived through so much together. We've built a life, a family. I'm not afraid." He looked at her, searching for something, maybe permission, maybe strength. Then he nodded. "You remember when I told you about my childhood, about how hard it was? Of course. I didn't tell you everything." And just like that, the dam began to crack. Giannis spoke slowly, as if he were choosing each word with care, afraid that even one misstep might shatter the fragile space between them. "When I was 12, he began, "there was someone else, a boy. His name was Andreas." Mariah froze. "He was my brother, my half-brother." The word landed heavily. Mariah didn't speak, didn't blink. "My father, before he met my mother, he had a relationship. No one really talked about it. It was in Nigeria before we ever moved to Greece. But when my father went back one summer, he came back with a boy. Andreas said he was family, and we believed him." Giannis paused, his voice trembling. "For 2 summers, he lived with us. Just me and him sharing a mattress, stealing fruit from the market, chasing balls through the dirt. He was like my shadow. I taught him Greek, he taught me Yoruba. We were kids, but we were tight, closer than close. He used to call me Egbon, Big Brother. Mariah listened, silent, her hand still on his. But things were hard, he continued. We didn't have enough, not for all of us. And Andreas, he wasn't documented. My father didn't even try. I think he was ashamed. And one day, after a fight with my mother, my father sent him back. Just like that. Said it was temporary, said it was best. Giannis looked down. I never saw him again. He took a shaky breath. I wrote to him, at first, but I never got a reply. Then I got older, started playing ball more seriously. Everything happened so fast. Tryouts, teams, the scouts, the NBA. I told myself I'd go back for him when I made it, that I'd bring him here, give him everything he didn't have. But time passed, and the more successful I became, the harder it got to explain. He swallowed. It wasn't just shame, it was fear. I didn't want to bring him into the spotlight, or worse, find out something happened to him. So I kept quiet, even from you. Tears were rolling down Mariah's cheeks now, silently. I wrote that letter to you 5 years ago. I was going to give it to you on our anniversary. But then we found out we were pregnant again, and I don't know. I kept telling myself I'd find the right moment. He looked away again. But there's never a right moment to tell someone you left your brother behind. Mariah stood up and walked into the kitchen without a word. Giannis closed his eyes, certain he had broken something irreparable. But when she returned, she held the letter in one hand and a tissue box in the other. Read it to me, she said. He hesitated. Please, she whispered. And so in the quiet of that porch, under the weight of old pain and newer love, Giannis unfolded the letter and began to read. It wasn't perfect. The grammar was clumsy, the ink smudged. But it was honest and raw. It was the story of a boy who lost his brother, and the man who never stopped trying to find him again, even if only in memory. When he finished, Mariah didn't say anything. She just wrapped her arms around him and held him. For a long time, neither spoke. But something had shifted, subtle but undeniable. In the silence, something unspoken began to heal. The next morning, the world looked the same. The children still woke up far too early. The kettle still hissed and clicked on the stove. Outside, the streetlights flickered off one by one, surrendering to daylight. But something had changed, subtle, imperceptible to anyone else, yet seismic within Mariah. She moved through the motions of her day with a calm alertness, as though each moment might be part of a larger message she was finally beginning to understand. Giannis, too, was quiet, but not the same kind of quiet. Not the old guarded silence that had kept parts of him locked away. This was something gentler, a man beginning to exhale after holding his breath for years. Mariah kept thinking about the name, Andreas. It had echoed in her mind all night. A brother. A second life tucked into the shadows of Giannis's rise. She couldn't stop imagining him, what he looked like, where he lived, what he thought of Giannis now. Did he still think of him as Egbon? Did he still remember the laughter, the dirt roads, the clumsy games of football and stolen fruit? Later that day, while Giannis was at practice, Mariah stood in their home office, staring at a narrow drawer she'd only opened twice in the past year. It held personal files, expired passports, their children's immunization records, and buried in the middle, a thick manila folder labeled Athens. She pulled it out gently, placed it on the desk, and flipped it open. Inside were decades of papers, some in Greek, some in English, others in crumpled receipts or faded shipping forms. There were letters, too. Unsent ones, she realized. They were all addressed to Andreas A. and postmarked to various addresses in Lagos. Some had been returned. Others were never sent. The handwriting was unmistakably Giannis's. She read the first one. Brother, I don't know if this will find you or if you even remember me. My name is Giannis. I know it's been years. I dream of the summer we ran through the dust like animals, barefoot and full of sugar. I remember your voice calling me from the alley, how you made me laugh with the way you danced. I hope you forgive me. I should have come back for you. I swear I wanted to. She stopped reading. The emotion was too raw. These weren't letters written for effect. They weren't composed for an audience. They were desperate, aching, filled with guilt and longing. And Giannis had kept them all. It broke her heart, not just for Andreas, but for Giannis, the boy inside him who had carried this weight across oceans, arenas, and accolades. That night, as they lay in bed, Mariah turned to him and said, "We have to find him." Giannis didn't respond at first, but he didn't resist. "I tried," he said softly. "I really did. Years ago, hired people, looked through old church records, even visited Lagos in secret once during the off-season. But no one knew where he'd gone. His mother passed away, and the last family he lived with, cousins, I think, they moved to Port Harcourt. After that, nothing, just silence." Mariah could see it in his eyes, the part of him that had given up, the part that had convinced itself it was too late, but she wasn't ready to accept that. "Then let me try," she said. He looked at her, startled. "What do you mean?" "I mean, let me help you, really help you." The next morning, Mariah reached out to someone she hadn't spoken to in years, Tassos Kalamaris, a Greek investigative journalist she'd met during Giannis's early years in the league. Tassos had always shown a deep respect for privacy and had proven himself trustworthy. When Mariah explained what she was looking for, he didn't ask why, he only asked for time. "I'll find him," Tassos said. "I'll do it quietly, no press, no trail." Days passed. Giannis didn't press for updates. He spent his evenings quietly, sometimes with the kids, sometimes just alone in the backyard, bouncing a ball between his legs with the absent-minded grace of someone whose body knew motion better than stillness. Mariah watched him, feeling both closer and further away than ever. A week later, Tassos sent a message. "I have something." Mariah's heart pounded as she clicked open the email. There was no attachment, just a line of text. "You need to see this in person. It's sensitive." They met in a cafe in Athens. Giannis didn't come. He wasn't ready. Tassos slid a single photo across the table. In it, a man stood in front of a crumbling school building in Ogun State. He looked to be in his early 30s with high cheekbones, deep-set eyes, and a familiar curve to his shoulders. He was handing a soccer ball to a group of children. The caption read, "Andreas Adebayo, volunteer coach, St. Kizito's School." Mariah held her breath. The resemblance was undeniable. "I spoke with the headmaster," Tassos said. "He came here 10 years ago. Doesn't talk much about his past. No family listed, but the kids adore him. They call him Coach Dre." Mariah's hands trembled as she held the photo. "Does he know who he is?" "I don't think so," Tassos said. "Or if he does, he's buried it." "But he's alive, he's there." Back in Milwaukee, she showed the photo to Giannis. He stared at it for a long time. "That's him," he said finally. "God, that's him." They didn't speak much that night. The magnitude of the moment was too big. Giannis walked around the house like a man in a dream. He called his mother briefly, told her what Mariah had found. She wept on the phone. She had known, of course, but the subject had been forbidden for years, buried under layers of pain, shame, and circumstance. It took Giannis 2 more days to work up the courage to write a message. Simple, honest. "Dear Andreas, I don't know if you'll want to hear from me. I've searched for you for years. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I never forgot you. I am your brother, and I love you. If you're willing, I'd like to talk." Mariah helped him send it through Tassos, who relayed it to the school. They waited. A week passed, then another. Nothing. And then, one evening, just before dinner, Giannis's phone buzzed with a notification. A voice message. He pressed play. The accent was different, older, rougher, but the voice, it was unmistakable. "Giannis? This is strange. I don't know what to say. I didn't think you'd remember. I used to watch you sometimes. On TV. I didn't think you'd remember me. I thought maybe I was just something you had to forget. I don't know if I can talk yet, but I'm glad you wrote. Thank you." Giannis sat down heavily, phone still in hand. Mariah kneeled in front of him. "He answered," she whispered. "He answered," Giannis repeated. They sat there together, tears falling quietly between them. That night, Giannis sent another message. "Whenever you're ready, I'm here. I never stopped being your big brother." He didn't expect a reply. But this time it came quickly. "Maybe we could talk just once, no pressure." The call was set for the next day. They spoke for an hour, then 2. Giannis sat alone in the study, headphones in, speaking in a soft, broken mix of English and Greek. Sometimes he laughed. Sometimes he covered his face and sobbed. Mariah listened from the hallway, unable to hear the words but feeling the reunion like a pulse through the walls. Afterward, he came to her, exhausted, lighter. "He forgives me," he said. He said, "He thought I forgot him. But he never stopped calling me Egbon." Mariah held him as he cried. In the quiet that followed, she knew they had crossed a threshold. The secret was no longer a wound. It was a bridge. And on the other side, a brother waited. A week after the call, Giannis stood in front of the mirror in the guest room, adjusting the collar of a simple button-down shirt. It was rare to see him this nervous, fidgeting, his hands twitching, lips parting and pressing together without a word. In all the time Mariah had known him, she'd seen him prepare for NBA finals, deliver eulogies, speak to kings and presidents. But nothing compared to this. Today he would meet his brother in person for the first time in over 15 years. Mariah stood at the doorway, quiet, watching him from the threshold. He glanced at her reflection in the mirror. "You think he'll still want to see me when he gets here?" he asked, voice small. "He already does," she replied gently. The school where Andreas coached had helped arrange the travel. Giannis had offered to fly him first class, send a private jet if needed. Andreas had declined it all. He came commercial economy with only one bag and a leather journal that never left his hand. When he stepped into the terminal at General Mitchell Airport, Mariah spotted him first. He was thinner than Giannis, but not by much. His walk was familiar. A long, deliberate stride, almost as though he expected the earth to shift beneath him. Giannis stood frozen behind her, wide-eyed, rooted to the tile like a boy caught between time and gravity. Andreas spotted them and paused. For a second, no one moved. Then Giannis stepped forward. Neither of them spoke. They just walked toward each other and embraced, arms around shoulders, heads pressed together, breathing the same air for the first time in over a decade. A hush seemed to fall around them. Travelers passed by without looking twice, unaware that something sacred had just occurred beside Gate 22. That evening they sat around the dinner table like old friends rediscovering a language. The children stared at Andreas with open curiosity, unsure how he fit into their world, but instinctively drawn to him. He had a quiet charisma, wry smiles, calm eyes, and a deep voice that carried weight without demanding attention. He answered their questions gently, listened more than he spoke, and when their youngest asked if he'd ever played basketball, he laughed and said, "Not like your dad. I was more of a football guy. Your kind of football." It took days for the rhythm to settle. Giannis would sometimes disappear mid-conversation, overwhelmed by emotion. Andreas would retreat to the porch to smoke a cigarette he rarely finished. Mariah watched it all unfold with tenderness. This wasn't a movie reunion. It wasn't perfect or smooth. It was jagged, human, full of pauses and second-guessing. One night, as the brothers sat by the fireplace after the children had gone to bed, Andreas finally spoke about the years in between. "I waited for you," he said quietly. Not accusatory, just honest. "The first few years I thought every knock on the door would be you. Then I thought maybe you'd forgotten, so I stopped waiting." Giannis nodded, jaw tight. "I didn't forget," he said. "I know," Andreas replied. "Now I do." He opened his journal and handed it to Giannis. Inside were pages filled with sketches, notes, and letters he had written to Giannis but never sent, memories captured in short paragraphs, moments from their childhood, the sound of rain on zinc roofs, the rhythm of their mother's cooking, the way they used to climb mango trees until their fingers bled. Giannis flipped through the pages, tears in his eyes. "You remembered all this?" he whispered. "Every day," Andreas said. "You were the first person who ever made me feel safe." That night, Mariah found Giannis sitting at the edge of their bed, the journal open in his lap. He didn't look up when she entered. "He's stronger than I am," Giannis said. "No," she replied, "he just survived differently." The next few weeks were a blur of quiet healing. They visited parks, cooked together, played with the children. Andreas became a gentle presence in the household, neither guest nor intruder, just there like a long-lost melody returning to a song. Giannis took him to practice one day, introduced him to a few close teammates, not as my half-brother, not as a charity case, but simply, my brother. The pride in his voice was unmistakable. Word of the reunion eventually leaked. A small sports blog ran a piece about the mysterious man seen with Giannis at a charity event. The speculations swirled. Was he a cousin, a friend, a spiritual advisor? But Giannis said nothing. He didn't need to. A week later, a different story appeared, an anonymous essay published in a European magazine under the title, "The Man My Brother Became." It was written in first person, clear and spare in its prose. It spoke of separation, memory, and forgiveness. No names were mentioned, no headlines made. But those who needed to understand did. Mariah knew Andreas had written it. She recognized his voice immediately. When she asked Giannis if he'd read it, he nodded. "He wrote it for both of us," he said, "to let us both breathe." There was a morning near the end of Andreas's stay that remained etched in Mariah's mind. The kids were playing in the yard, Giannis shooting hoops lazily, Andreas watching from a bench with a cup of tea. Mariah sat beside him. "You're good for him," he said. "He's good for me too." Andreas smiled, then looked down at the mug in his hand. "You saved him," he said. Mariah shook her head. "No, I just gave him a place to rest." He nodded slowly. "You gave him a place to remember." The day of Andreas's departure was quiet. No big ceremony, no grand send-off, just hugs, long silences, and one final family breakfast where nobody touched their food. "I'll come back," he promised, crouching to hug the children. "You better," Giannis said, voice thick. Mariah handed him a small envelope before he left. Inside was a photograph, Giannis and Andreas standing side by side in the backyard, arms around each other, sunlight in their eyes. On the back, she had written only 4 words. "The bridge is built." Months passed. Life resumed. Games were played. Seasons changed. But something had shifted in Giannis. A quiet peace had settled inside him. He no longer disappeared into himself after games. He spoke more often about his past, about the streets of Cipolla, about his father, about loss. He even began mentoring young players from difficult backgrounds, guiding them not just in sport but in spirit. And then, one afternoon, Mariah came home to find him in the garage, holding a basketball that looked out of place. Older, worn, the leather faded. "Is that?" He nodded. "It's the ball Andreas gave me from when we were kids. He found it in storage, brought it with him." Mariah reached for it, feeling the roughness of the surface. "It's heavier than I thought." Giannis smiled. So was the silence. They stood there for a moment, both of them holding the ball, and in that shared weight was a kind of redemption neither of them could name. Eventually, Andreas moved to the States, not to Milwaukee, but close enough. He started working with a youth foundation, helping immigrant kids find footing through sport and language. Giannis visited often, so did the kids, and every so often the two brothers would sit together under the stars, their children playing in the distance, the past between them no longer a wall but a road. Mariah watched all of this unfold, not as a spectator, but as the quiet architect of their reunion. She never sought credit. She didn't need to. Her joy was in the sound of Giannis's laughter, freer now, in the sight of 2 men once boys separated by silence, now bound again, not by blood alone, but by choice. And sometimes, when the house was still, and the air held the softness of peace, she would open the letter Giannis had once written her and read it again, not because she needed to remember, but because she needed to feel just how far they had come. Because some secrets, when shared, don't destroy love. They deepen it. They define it. They finally let it breathe.